Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2000 film Highlander Endgame. More like Highlander End Shame, because this film is a shameless sequel and a piece of shit. I would say it's not as big of a piece of shit as Highlander the Source, but that film is such a massive piece of shit that it almost puts all other pieces of shit to shame. So the fact that this is still a piece of shit, but it's not as big of a one as that movie, isn't really saying a lot. Because it still stinks. And it's still bad. And it's still terrible. And it still needs to be flushed down the toilet. Or left for the sewer system to deal with. It's directed by Doug Aarniokoski, or however you say the guy's last name. This guy is the epitome of a hack director. The guy hasn't really done a whole lot since this, didn't really do a whole lot before it. He did some TV stuff, and he did some more TV stuff after this. This guy is a director that you hire to direct like one episode of a TV show when you can't find anyone else, and that's about it. This is not a guy who should be anywhere near directing a feature film, and Highlander Endgame is a prime example of this. Say whatever you want about Morahan and definitely Mulcahy, both of them actually showed some semblance of directing talent and ability. This guy is showing as much talent as the guy or the multiple amount of people that directed RoboCop Prime Directives for the Sci-Fi Channel back in the late 90s and early 2000s. I believe it's an early 2000s show. So that's a really bad sign. That's a sign of some pretty piss poor directing if you're reminding people of RoboCop Prime Directives. I was like watching this, I'm like, is this from the same guy? Is this from the same people responsible for that shitty show? Because that's what it looks like, especially when it comes to the action scenes. And the sword fights and everything are just set up in a way where they don't really have any real excitement or thrills, or there's not really a lot of frills either. It's just very generic and bland and dull when it comes to the way that they're shot. Same thing goes for any of these other sequences that just deal with characters monologuing or talking, or anything's trying to set up a setting or an establishing shot. Or it's just one of those movies where visually it's just completely and totally unimpressive. At best, the direction is mid. At worst, it's pretty awful. And I honestly would say it's pretty awful most of the time. Uh, it's just one of those movies that it just baffles me that this got a theatrical release. Like there are a fair amount of movies that get theatrical releases that make you scratch your head and go like, really? Like what? This was released in theaters, but something like Deadly Outbreak with Jeff Speakman, that never got a wide theatrical release, or something like Showdown in Little Tokyo with Brandon Lee and Dolph Lundgren, that didn't get a wide theatrical release, but Highlander Endgame got a wide theatrical release. And yeah, the direction is just completely lackluster and lacking in pretty much every possible way. It looks like something that you would see on television. It just looks like another episode of the Highlander TV show. That's not what you want out of a Highlander feature film. You want it to have a cinematic scope and feel and look to it. And the director doesn't provide that, whether it's with his camera techniques that he employs, whether it's with his usage of camera movements or pans or zooms or angles or anything of that sort. It just looks bad. And the script by Joel Soason is not any better. You could tell that Joel Soason was just half-assing this entire movie in terms of his script, because this is the same guy who wrote like 50 other scripts, it seems like, in the same time span for a bunch of other forgettable sequels in franchises that arguably didn't even need to be franchises to begin with. And it fails as a sequel to Highlander 3 or the first Highlander, and it equally fails when it comes to being a send-off or a finale to the TV series. It doesn't succeed on any of those fronts. And that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to be a send-off to the Highlander films, as well as a send-off to the series. And all it does is just piss me off as a fan of both. I'm like, this is what we get when it comes to Connor McLeod and Duncan McLeod's final adventure together. Is this depressing, sad, pathetic excuse of a sequel? It even opens up awkwardly with Duncan and Connor meeting in New York, Connor acting all weird and just out of it. And then you get to see Rachel from the first movie, Connor's adopted daughter that he saved from the war, from World War II, only for her to get blown up. So it's go, oh, hey, there's Rachel. Oh no, there goes Rachel. That old lady got blown to smithereens. That sure was a nice send off to that character. Hey, you want to see Rachel again? Oh, there she is. Now you can see her her bones obliterated on the big screen. Good job. Nice. And then you get a lot of stuff involving this Kel character, who is the new big bad. And this big bad is so overpowered, it's absurd. He's killed 661 different immortals. He's doing this in ways that are never fully explained, and when they are, it just makes it seem like he's cheating. Oh, so he kills all these immortals in the sanctuary? Isn't that supposed to be holy ground? Well, apparently not. According to Joel Sowason, it's not holy ground, even though it's literally called the holy ground for Highlanders, for immortals. But okay, all right. Sure it's not holy ground. So he's killing people in sanctuaries. He's using a whole team of immortal henchmen to knock immortals out or incapacitate them so then he can cut their heads off. And I'm like, isn't that the complete opposite of what the game is supposed to be? I thought the game was like, okay, you can kill another immortal, but you have to do it in combat. You can't just kill another immortal by just drugging them and knocking them out and then cutting their head off. Or having other people incapacitate them and then cut their heads off. That kind of defeats the entire purpose of the game, if you could just cheat it like that. And if that was the case, why didn't Kurgan do any of this beforehand? Because Kurgan had been around for longer than Kel. Kurgan, if you read up on Kurgan had been around for centuries. So how is Kel the one guy who unlocked the code? Because the movie says so. That's why. So he's this overpowered villain who's at like power 9,000 because he's killed like over 600 immortals. And because of that, Connor isn't enough to defeat him, even though Connor defeated Kurgan on his own. And Duncan isn't enough to defeat him. So they have to come up with this just absolute bullshit reasoning that involves Connor and Duncan, that in order for Duncan to defeat Kel, because he's so overpowered, Connor has to die and Duncan has to absorb his quickening. And I'm like, well, why would that make any difference? If this guy has killed over 600 different immortals, why would it make a difference and give Duncan that much of an advantage if he just kills one? Like, it just doesn't really make any sense. Yeah, it's Connor, but this guy's killed all these other immortals that probably are just as skilled with a sword as Connor McLeod. So what kind of advantage does it really give Duncan in the end that makes any sense? And there's a lot of stuff involving Duncan and this love interest of his who he married all these years ago, um, uh, Kate, but she was immortal, but she hadn't been fatally wounded or hadn't been hurt yet, so her immortality hadn't kicked in. But she's immortal now because apparently Duncan was a dumbass and decided to just stab her on their wedding night so that she can be immortal, so he won't be alone. And so this causes her to be pissed at him, and now she doesn't want anything to do with him. Honestly, understandably so. But depending on what version of the film you see, so the theatrical cut, when she is there at the Last Supper with Kel, when Kel kills all of his henchmen to absorb more powers, she's one of them that gets killed because she's working for Kel. But in the DVD version, she lives because Kel just lets her go. And so she kisses and makes up with Duncan for reasons that I guess are just because she's tired of being mad at him for this amount of time. It's like 3 centuries is enough. I don't want to be mad at you for any longer than that. It's a bad script. It's a really just lame story. The best parts of it involve Connor and Duncan when they meet each other throughout the centuries. That honestly should have been more of the movie. Just them getting into various different adventures together that have some kind of element that ties things together. Maybe a common foe who keeps getting away, but then the rest of the movie is them in modern day, and they're getting that opportunity to take him out, hopefully this time for good. Something like that would have been fine. I have a different idea in mind, but I'm going to save that for another video. But I would have liked that at least. That would have been more of what you're wanting out of a Highlander Endgame movie that has Connor and Duncan, instead of whatever the hell they were doing here with this Kel guy. And the Kel character, not only is he way too overpowered to the point of just ridiculousness, he's the type of villain that monologues. So that just makes him insufferable. Because there's a whole scene where he faces off against Connor at a graveyard, and he's just monologuing the entire time. And I'm just like, shut the hell up already. I don't want to hear it. You don't sound like you're a badass when you're monologuing for ages. You just sound like a loser. Sound like a wanker. Stop being a wanker and shut the fuck up. And he's also the type who, okay, he's overpowered. He's considered to be this unstoppable force. And then when he gets into the final battle with your hero, which is Duncan, because Connor had to die in a fight with Duncan, because reasons. I guess they wanted to pass the torch fully to Duncan, but in this context, it doesn't really make that much sense because, for one, it doesn't make any sense that Connor would really give him that much of an extra advantage to defeat Kel. And second, the actor who's playing Duncan MacLeod, Adrian Paul, he was only 2 years younger than Christopher Lambert was by the time that they started filming this. So it's not like he's the young generation. They're from the same generation. So what... So I guess I heard the reason is, well, Christopher, he's got vision issues. And okay, here's a vision for you. Don't make another Highlander movie. Just let the series and its finale be it. Let the Final Dimension be the final send-off to the Highlander film series. It ended at a good note. This, it just seems to ignore the events of 3 entirely because, okay, now Connor doesn't have Alex, and his adopted son from Marrakesh is nowhere to be found. So I'm supposed to believe that he left Scotland for whatever reason, and now he's disillusioned and angry and mad for reasons that are not really explained. Oh, well, it's supposed to be a tie into the series. Even if it is a tie into the series, like the series pilot, Connor was completely different in the way that he acted in that compared to the way he acts here. So it doesn't even match the continuity of the series. And if you were looking at it to match the series or the films, well, he's only in it in terms of scenes with Duncan in the current day, in the current timeline that the majority of this film takes place in, for maybe like 2 scenes. And in one of them, he gets killed by Duncan. And then, like, the final fight, it really isn't much of anything. It's not that memorable. It's pretty dull and boring. I think in large part it's because of the fact that Bruce Payne, the actor who's playing Kel, he wasn't in very good health. So they just had to do a lot of workarounds, and it really shows. And it just makes for an end fight that, after all this buildup, with Kel being this incredibly formidable foe who has ties to Connor's past, and the fight with Duncan is lame and forgettable and the opposite of cool or badass or exciting or thrilling. I mean, Kel also does the same monologuing stuff throughout that fight, and there's even a moment where he does the cliched bullshit where he's all like, oh, you put up a good fight. Acts like the fight is over. But of course it's not. And then his opponent gets the upper hand and kills him. It's like, you're sure not as smart as you think you are. Way you've been acting, it's like you know all the answers and you know all the end games and you know all the possible combinations and the possible moves that your opponents are going to make before they make them, because you have all this knowledge that you've obtained from 600 different immortals, but you're going to pull this game of, oh, you put up a good fight, but it's over now. Give me a break. And yeah, it's not satisfying in terms of anything involving the finale, because it's not a good fight. And then if you watch the theatrical cut, well, at least it doesn't do the lame bullshit where the character Faith, Kate, is still alive at the end. At least it doesn't do that, but that's not saying much. This movie can't even utilize Donnie Yen properly. It has Donnie Yen. Yes, Donnie Yen is in this, but he's in it for like 3 scenes. So you have Donnie Yen and you do nothing with him. You have this unstoppable Highlander who at this point might as well be a character from Dragon Ball Z because of just how much power he's absorbed. And he's got this team of other immortals that look like rejects from Blade the series, and with sticky fingers. And you're like, okay, these 2 don't match. And like, what do you really have to look forward to with this? The action scenes? They're nothing special. I guess some of the stuff with Donnie Yen and Adrian Paul is okay, but it's not anything that's really that great. The fight between Duncan and Connor, not that great. The fight between Duncan and Kel, again, not very good. There's even moments where they use guns, the immortals, which I'm like, well, that kind of makes things really generic and lame. They don't even use swords, you just shoot people. And yeah, there's just so much about this. It sucks. It is. It's Highlander and shame. Shameful. Really shitty effects, too. Like, really bad CGI, especially near the end. When you see the quickening after Kel gets killed. And can somebody tell Adrian Paul how to act when he gets a quickening? Like, I don't know if he did this in the show, but like, because I haven't seen the show in a long time. But man, like when he does the quickening, it's so goofy. He's just like, ah, ah, yeah. It's like the quickening is turning him on. Like it's not one of these, not absorbing the power. It's doing something else. It's just I just don't understand. I don't get it. I don't get the orgasm acting when he gets a quickening. But at least somebody's getting some excitement. I didn't get any from this movie. But yeah, the script sucks ass. The performances by the cast really aren't much better. Adrian Paul, he's as stiff as a broadsword. He really is. He's so stiff in this. Like his acting is awful. Like this was supposed to be his launching pad to a film career. Nah, man, you don't have it. Cuz you had the opportunity to show that you had it here, and you have all the acting ability and charisma of a Power Ranger. And honestly, there are the Power Ranger actors who have more charisma than Adrian Paul has in this. Just unconvincing, stilted acting, just bad. Christopher Lambert just is there for a paycheck. You could tell that he didn't want to be there or didn't want to do this. Really not even remotely giving a shit. Except for maybe a couple scenes in the past. But any of the scenes involving Connor in the present are pretty pitiful. Uh, Bruce Payne as Jacob Kell. I like Bruce Payne. He was good as a villain in Passenger 57, but here, there's not much he can do with this role. Like, I feel bad for him because he was not really in the best of health at this time, but this performance is still not that good. Like, it's not awful, but he's just not intimidating at all. So in comparison to his role in Passenger 57 or Mario Van Peebles in The Final Dimension or Michael Ironside in Highlander 2, definitely Kurgan, Clancy Brown, it's no contest. Like Kel is just not intimidating at all. He comes across as like a mini boss instead of like the final boss. And Lisa Barbuscia might as well be Lisa Barbuscia, because this is the kind of performance that's so bad it makes you want to foam at the mouth, and just awful. Just a really bad performance. Like, I don't know if it was all the plastic surgery and that made it so she couldn't act or emote, or maybe a bit of both, but man, it was pretty hard to watch at times. Reminded me of Lisa Renna from Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., the David Hasselhoff uh, film. And apparently, I read that Lucy Lawless was supposed to be that role. I'm glad that she wasn't in this. She didn't need to demean herself by being in Highlander Endgame. Let other people do that. Donnie Yen plays Jin K, and there's like one scene with him where he does some martial arts that I remembered, but even that was kind of lame because he shows up on a motorcycle wearing what looks like a rooster hat. Like, what is he gonna say? Cockadoodle doo? Like what? Why is he? What is he wearing? Like who decided? Yeah, let's give the rooster hat to Donnie Yen because that'll look badass. And yeah, he's just barely in the movie. There's barely anything to do. He should have been the villain. He should have been the main bad guy. Why not? It's Donnie Yen. You also have Peter Wingfield, who's back as Methos, who was in the Highlander show. Jim Byrnes, who plays Joe, who was in the Highlander show. I liked Jim Byrnes' cameo in this because I like his character in the show, and he had some fun lines. I wish he was in it more, to be honest. You also have like Beatty Edney, who comes back as Heather, Connor's original first love from the first movie. Sheila Gish is back as Rachel, only to get blown up early on in the movie. You also have Edge. Yes, Edge from WWE. He has a cameo where Adrian Paul has a sword at his nuts and says, "Have you lost your edge, lad?" I'm like, God, really? You went there. Have you lost your edge? Get it? Because it's Edge? Like, that whole scene looked like some shit out of Mortal Kombat Conquest. Like, that's really what that scene reminded me of. I'm like, Like, great. And Edge was just, he was pretty excruciatingly terrible. Like, his acting was so bad in that scene. That whole sequence was bad. This film is just bad, period. It's disappointing because you have Connor McLeod and Duncan McLeod, and they don't really have a lot of scenes together where they're teaming up or they are fighting alongside one another. So it's disappointing in that regard. And it's also just very unnecessary. And it's also very like dark. Like, it doesn't have the same sense of camp or fun that the other Highlander films do or the series does. So tonally it just felt off as well. And I don't know where the hell this $25 million budget went. This does not look like it cost $25 million. People say that Highlander the Final Dimension looks cheap, and it does. This looks even cheaper. And it cost $25 million. I don't know where that budget is because it's not on the screen with its really piss poor, shitty green screen effects and CGI. And predictably, it did bad in theaters. It didn't do well at all. It only made like $15 million on a $25 million budget. It was a bomb, and it effectively killed the Highlander film franchise. There's been attempts to try to resurrect the Highlander franchise with a remake that's been stuck in development hell for years. And of course, then you had The Source, which came out after this, but that barely even counts because that was a made-for-TV movie. And this is really what this should have been anyway. This plays out and looks like a made-for-TV movie. And yeah, it's not good. It's bad. It's Highlander and shame. Technique-wise, the cinematography by Douglas Milsom is not awesome. It's very mediocre. The editing by this was edited by this many people. The editing by Chris Blunden, Rod Dean, Robert A. Ferretti, Tracy Granger, Michael N. New, Donald Peonessa is a blunder. This film is just really poorly edited. It really looks like a total just hack and slash job of the highest order, especially when it comes to the action sequences. You needed, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 6 editors for this? 6? You had 6 editors, and all of them combined couldn't do an adequate job? 6? The music by Nick Lenny Smith and Steven Graziano, completely unimpressive, completely forgettable. I don't remember a single note from it. The only thing of music-wise I honestly even remember is they used the same Scottish folk song from Highlander 3 at the end of the movie when Duncan goes to Connor's grave. Other than that, there's nothing that noteworthy about this score. And yeah, it's 87 minutes. That's the theatrical cut. If you watch the DVD version, it's like an hour and 50, an hour and 40 something minutes. So it's longer and duller. At least if I saw the theatrical version, that would have been shorter. It would have been less painful. I don't think a lot of the new additions really add a whole lot. It doesn't really make the film better. It takes away some things like, oh, now the JVC sign isn't shown in one scene, and we cut out the whole holy ground bit because that's pretty contradictory. But other than that, it's still pretty much the same movie, and it's still just as disappointing no matter what cut you see. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Highlander Endgame. Thanks for watching the review, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.